There's a new intro.
What do you think of that?
That's cool.
It's in the works.
What sort of music is that? I feel like the music was very Charles.
It was Charles. We pulled it from his personal 8-track record collection.
Nice.
We're starting to add some bells and whistles to this. It's looking good. There's more tricks up our sleeves coming soon for anybody that's watching. All right, so Charles, you were just at the IFA convention. You were the only one that went of the three of us. What were the hot button topics? What are we talking about this week?
Hot button topics that I personally engaged in. Not many. You put me on the spot here after I just said something else. So, I mean, Nick, you just killed me. I mean, I don't think there were any new hot button topics, and maybe that's a good thing. When everyone starts portraying here's the new thing or the next thing, I mean, that could be a sign and signal that you're not building your ground game and fundamentals, right? So I get worried when a client calls me up and says, hey, what about if I do this with the royalty or build that into this and do this with that? And I tell them all the time, I say, I'm going to answer your question, but after that, I want to know why you're bringing this up, right? So usually it's franchisors that are searching for something. They're not gaining traction. They're looking for growth opportunity. And then they're just getting various opinions, which are focused on little widgets or little changes that don't make a difference, because it's very hard to tell someone you need to build up your fundamentals and your ground game, and you need to do hard work. I mean, I have it all the time. We've told clients where even after they've launched, you're never going to sell a franchise in the next 12 months, so let's build up the foundation. People don't like that. So what I've heard at the conference, I mean, people at roundtables and all these other things that are good, but they're just ideas. And then they're sort of, in my opinion, disjointed from, a foundational plan.
Interesting.
Is that gibberish? Does that mean it's gibberish?
No, gibberish. I'll help you out. I'll give a topic, because I think Brent's gonna have a good opinion on this. Okay, so take what you just said, right? You have, like, I think about the dinner that we did. Let's call it half of the brands there are emerging, and they're stuck in the mud. Like they're struggling to get that first deal executed. And then you look over to either left or right, whatever side it's on, and Brent's company's there, and Brent's company has figured out a way to facilitate introductions between a broker community and the franchisor. At the same time, the broker community has figured out a way to facilitate introductions or networking with all of these novice buyers that are saying, I have money, I want to be in business for myself, I don't know what to buy. And so in today's world, it's like the only way you're going to go on a supercharged growth path in today's franchise world is if you get into a fast lane or one of the other FSOs that exist that say, cool, we've worked tirelessly, we've spent a lot of money on wine and dining the brokers, we'll take on your brand, but in exchange, we're going to, take half of the fee. If you zoom out of this, what's crazy to me is take a fast lane brand. At the end of the day, their cost per acquisition is, call it somewhere between $30,000 and $100,000 per deal. And what's crazy is, and Brent, I think you're the best expert for this because you've been on both sides of the fence. What's crazy is when we're advising brands to budget 25, they balk at that. Yet the reality of today's world is somewhere between $30,000 and $100,000 is what you're paying if you go with a fast lane when you're accounting, and possibly more than that when you're accounting for everything. And so we're still in this place, and I hear it in the conversation that I'm having around the room at this dinner, beyond it, we're still in a place where we're like, it's like brands are trying to go hunt for the $10,000 deal, and they do exist. But the reality is the cost per acquisition is probably closer to $50,000 per deal, thanks to this supercharge model. Now, if you don't want to supercharge, which is not wrong, it's just a different growth approach, then you got to be prepared to go slow and steady. But like at the end of the day, I think the biggest topic for here and beyond is cost per deal is somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. The return is greater than that when you look at royalty, but that's the cost of doing business, and nobody's looking in the room and saying this is our new reality.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it last week, and this is a nice little extension from that. But firstly, I say this all the time, find me another industry where you're spending even $25,000, $30,000, $100,000 for the returns that happen over 10 years for that one customer, that repeat customer that's almost locked in. It's a very special business model, and this is why private equity in the last few years has gravitated and now fiending over franchising. I think it stems back to when I really start to look at it and think of it, it stems back to, the smart franchisors, even just the more experienced, for say, they understand, they get to the point where they understand the honeypot is the royalty stream. And I'm going to give up 100% of the franchise fee. I'm never going to look at that as a profit stream. And those folks that get to that position, the faster they get there, the healthier they become. Now, it's kind of, remember last week we talked about, business owners that run their businesses by looking at what's there in their checking account and not running off a cash forecast or a P&L. It's similar to that, right? And so if you're getting so infuriated, so focused on, well, it's $25,000 when it should be $10,000, it's perhaps a short-sighted view of what you're trying to build. And ultimately, one of the biggest things I find, one of the real ailments there when you get down to it is, were you well capitalized enough to do this in the first place? Because if you're that focused on every little dollar to get that return and you don't see the value in it and you're emotionally driven about it, a lot of the times it comes back to you just weren't capitalized enough to come into this business to truly understand the investment that needs to happen to hit that royalty stream, to hit that ROI that, again, private equity is fiending over right now. So I often find that those are the two things, just short-sightedness or inexperience or a lack of capital. And that's what drives them to focusing on the acquisition when you really need to have a longer-term view, in my opinion.
Well, and everybody's looking around the room and pointing towards these brands that had the mindset and made the investment in a Fastlane or another FSO or some sort of accelerator, and they're comparing themselves to them without looking at what is the all-in cost. Like a brand that award through a Fastlane, a brand that awards 100 deals just spent $5 million on franchisee acquisition. But to the brand that's looking, I'm like, why do they get to get 100 deals and why can't I? It's because they spent $5 million to do so. Now, in the end, that $5 million should turn into 15, 20, 30, whatever that number is, if you do this the right way. But they don't look at apples to apples. And I think that is still my greatest disappointment about this fake love fest that exists in franchising. Is there's very few companies. This is from the time that I franchise your business to the time I lay out your game plan for how you're going to grow your business to how I'm going to market, who does it honestly. It's very, very few and far between. And so to merge, I saw this in the room when I was there for the one night. Guys walk in the room and he's making these connections and he's like, I was told, he went up to Mark at Edible. He's like, I was told to come talk to you. Like you're the guy that I need to talk to. And Mark goes on this like speech about how franchising works. The guy's like, okay, yeah, but like where's the easiest place for me to get deals? It was like, I don't think people listen. And maybe that's the opportunity in franchising for any supplier that's out there. Everybody's not listening, so just do what you want.
No, but let's go ultra, new franchisor, startup, ultra emerging. There's that hum. You have some of those franchisors throughout the IFA conference, and people are giving them little tactics but no strategy, and you buy it, and the widget does what it's supposed to do, but without the strategy is never going to work, right? And so that's consistently there. And that's where I focus. And so I will tell every new emerging franchisor out there, all one of them may be listening to this, but they will over time. I think your franchisee acquisition cost for your first 5 deals should be $0, provided that you first invested in your infrastructure built out what you need to build. And it's not going to happen in the 90-day franchise development process, or, it's going to happen over the next 12 to 24 months. And it's got to be authentic and genuine. And then you're going to do it. You're going to get those first 5 franchisees. And then you, as Nick would say, build your scaffolding around them and grow. And I will tell you, your acquisition cost should be $0. Now, the caveat to that is I want you to spend money on real things, real website, real video, real process, and real like advisory on these things. The problem is all these new franchisors enter the space. They don't take that step. They've depleted capital before it. They leap over that important step, go to the expos, go do all these things. They don't gain traction. Then they come back next year in the same position. And the hardest questions I have is when someone presents me with that question is I tell them what to do, because I do believe in it. 100% I've seen it happen. Organic franchise sales, seasoning your franchise offering, they don't do it. Or, it's hard work. But if you don't start with that base, you're going to be at these conferences and shows perpetually, and you'll go to all these great events and you'll be pumped up and everyone's a great person. But you're not reaching the goal that you set off to reach.
I'm gonna put in a comment here in a second from our audience, because I do want this to be as interactive as possible. I think there's value, but I'm gonna read you an email I got this morning. Hi team, good news. Have 4 leads in the system. Have 3 confirmed DD on 3/6. Great. This is from a franchisor who I started advising 2 years ago. I said how the pathway is going to work. I finally got this franchisor to spend a little bit more to get him over the edge. And we got the spend and the right dialed in audience 1 month ago. And that's the email I get this morning. It can totally work. I believe in what Charles said. Let me put up Chris's comment. And first I'm going to give Chris props on his business, Happy Cat Hotel. Here's what I find is interesting about Chris. I interviewed him a few weeks ago. First of all, he's allergic to cats and he owns a cat business. So I love that part of his story. But what he saw is a gap in the marketplace. Everybody's going after the doggy day schools or day hotels or whatever they are, the doggy hotels. And he said, well, here's another category where the pet lovers love the pet business. Why don't I try something else? And if you think about licensing, like you don't need like the outdoor space for the dogs to use the bathroom. You don't need the same sort of filtration systems to clear out all the stuff from sewage. Like it's an interesting pathway. And his performance is showing it. But he just wrote that then franchise factories shouldn't take on undercapitalized aspiring franchisors, but they do because they get paid either way, even if the brand fails. Do either of you want to say a comment back on Chris's comment?
So franchise factories, we're probably referring to the franchise development setup companies, attorneys and whatnot, right? Is that our understanding of that?
Yeah. I would say FSOs and brokers.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's more, I think it's development companies, franchise developers and lawyers.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's a fair statement, right? I think there's so much of that out there, and it allows the companies that do it the right way with ethics to win. And I think we see that. You see companies like Charles that has 300 very happy clients, and he set a lot of those up. You see there's probably 5 or 6 FSOs. It's interesting, like what's good in franchising. One of the conversations I'm continuing to hear to bubble up right now is kind of the negative side of the FSO, the dark side of the FSO, being painted as this negative force in franchising. And of course, I started one, and I want to go one, so I've got a different opinion. But there is a lot of that out there that gives credence to that kind of statement, but it also allows a really good ones. There's 5 or 6 really good FSOs. And sure, none of us are perfect. We misfire with some brands. But I think that what franchisors and industry folks might not see at like a Fastlane or a Raintree is what actually goes into that process that Chris referred to there of evaluating them. We spend on average 4.5 months digging into franchisors' financials. We validate with each of the franchisees. And it's not just unique to Fastlane or Raintree. There's 4 or 5 other really good FSOs that do the same. And so I think, yes, absolutely, it's a fair statement, but there's also really good FSOs that do good in franchising and allow brands and franchisees access to business models that perhaps they wouldn't have gotten into, or at least at the speed if they weren't there. And so it's an interesting conversation. Are you guys kind of seeing a little bit of that bubble up too, that FSO?
I want to defend you on that, even though you don't need defending. First of all, the reason you spend 4 months looking at it is because you're in the business of making money. You're not going to take on a brand that you don't think you can move. Like
it
that
costs a lot of money
right.
to move.
Sure. On the flip side, I'm gonna use an example of a brand because I knew them intimately before they sold that you worked with. And it would have been hard. It was a brand that got up to 100 units probably 15 times and then rolled back to 60, 70, 60, 50, back to 70. And so what happens, this dark side of franchising, well, it's shame on the franchisor because these franchisors come into, they perceive that if I go into an FSO, I'm going to get this accelerated growth. But what Charles said at the beginning of this, if you didn't focus on the fundamentals of your business and actually create a good business, you will not accelerate because a bad business is a bad business is a bad business. So here, Brent used the word misfire, but unfortunately, no, it's the franchisor comes in with false expectations on how they should be growing. And, maybe there's some transparency there to say, look, unless you have this unit level economics, unless your franchisees are all continuing to grow, especially in the restaurant space, which is the one that I'm thinking of, then you're not going to have this accelerate. We could still help you grow, but it's not going to be at you're not going to have 500 units tomorrow. So I think for what I've seen out of you and probably most of the FSOs, the biggest mistake they make is they have a darling where they can point to and say, look at this growth. And they use that in their case studies. And so the franchisor comes in with these false expectations that they're going to be like that too.
And that's true. That's one side of the darkness, right? And there's a lot of companies out there that do this. It's right. Chris is right. And there's many that the three of us know that will say, I'll take your concept and I'll sell a couple hundred in a couple of years. That's one side of it. And the other side is, well, these FSOs do sell a couple hundred in a year, but to anyone with a checkbook and a pulse, and they close them. And they're the two kind of fundamental problems that the industry has with the FSO on the dark side. And I think that, again, with many companies, it's fair. But, it also serves like these bad companies that go out there and promise a couple hundred units in a couple of years, and they've never really done that. And there's a lot of them. They really help us. So we have a brand that we all work with together. It worked for a couple of years almost. Charles, you probably pretty quickly know this one. With one of these franchise incubators, they do the setup, the legal, the FDD, and then they sell leads and they work them too. And they promised this particular brand a lot of deals, and after a year or two, they'd done one. And that just sets the scene for us when we come in with realistic expectations. We ask them to speak to other franchisors. Yeah, we did come in and sell 100 now in the first year, but we fundamentally understood that concept and believed in it. I bought 10 units of it myself. That's kind of the level of all in we go with the brands, and we go through that process. And the bad characters out there allow the few good ones out there to do well. But again, it's not a wrong comment because it is out there. And I know, Charles, you see more of it than anyone of these franchise factories. I think as a blanket statement, I think probably the biggest problem is these companies that try to do it all and not specialize in just doing one part of it really right.
Wait, Charles, before you say what you're going to do, I am going to add creative because now Brent just teed it up. I'm going to have something like the spaceman's going to go like this. He's going to throw a punch when we know Charles is about to start a franchise fight. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I'm not starting one, but I'm not. Some important things for franchisors that'll be listening to this. Number one, the bad FSOs, they will take on any brand. Whereas Raintree, Fastlane, you guys super scrutinize who you take on, and that's clear. And the thing that I feel bad about the most is when I see a brand work with a different type of FSO and they weren't ready. And a year later, other than canceling their contract with the FSO and the monthly payment, they're still not ready and nothing's advanced. So that's the tragedy. That's the hard part when I see that. On the franchise factories, it just happens every day. And they're out there and they're just selling on the concept. But for the franchisors out there, just think of the important task here. Like when you look at these FSOs and they do have that one shiny brand that sold 100, step back and evaluate why that brand sold, right? So if it's an FSO that doesn't have a good track record, the reason why it probably sold well is it was in white space, right? It was a new category or a unique category. Its economic positioning just fit in the right way. And then, reverse engineer that and understand you need to build your platform. And the companies, the mills that are just pushing out these franchises, I mean, for you guys, you have a decision to make. One, should you even be in franchising? Which could mean pause now and build up unit economics, or just stop and not spend any more on franchising, right? That I think, or like the brand that Brent mentioned, roll up your sleeves and reboot and have the courage or conviction and reboot this. And we have those calls also where it's a pretty good business and the team invested in the franchising process. And you have one leader from the team saying, "Hey, I know this isn't right." And then when you tell them, "Look, we tell them all the time that not because we're lawyers and we claim our stuff is better than everyone else, but we can't work with your FDD because it's too much liability for us and not worth it. But two, you need a reboot." And the worst thing you could see is they spend all this money, so they don't want to spend a little more. And then they just stick with the same program. So, I mean, it's out there. But look, the big takeaway is if you're a brand out there, you need to be working on the brand. You're not going to IFA conferences, meeting people, or learning, buying magic seeds at a round table. They don't exist. You need to.
How are you doing this, by the way?
That's the iOS update. If you thumbs up and you've got that turned on,
I didn't know that.
Oh my God, your thumbs up keep floating on the screen.
Yeah. But look, so big takeaway, good conversations at IFA. I think Simon, if you could put up Simon's comment.
I will. But give me one more thumbs up.
I give you a thumbs up, Nick.
But it's weird. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
It's like reading his mind. That's crazy.
But there's no. So he says, what was the general mindset of the community? Franchisors optimistic for growth for 2024. The answer is anyone I spoke to, they were very optimistic. But
how about that one guy? You said, "How are things going?" He goes, "I'm super busy. Everything's great."
Yeah, that kind of depresses me because I'd like to, at least at the human level, connect with someone who's saying, "How you doing?" and "How's everything else?" And it's like, everything's going well. I'm so busy. I'm like, who in this conference isn't going to say that? Not that I would. I've been in. I decided to. I'm creating 2 groups. They have a leadership conference. I'm going to lead up the unleadership conference. We're going to be unexpected. And I'm thinking I could just keep it bad.
I gave a thumbs up when you said that.
And I'm thinking I could start another group, which is the future IFA presidents. And it'll be just a group of us that believe in the future we may be. And we could issue proclamations from there.
See, I think that's close to franchise fight. Like, we're getting closer. Like, Charles offline versus Charles online are 2 different people.
So, but everyone was positive. But again, cutting through all the items, and I had clients, some clients just racing to roundtables, which I appreciate. But I'm like, let's. I feel like all these roundtables create 5 good ideas with 0 implementation.
Yeah, I feel like I know I wasn't there, so let me put that disclaimer on there. I feel the roundtables set people up for almost failure in 2 ways. One, the expert that's picked to lead these roundtables, oftentimes you're not even an expert, and everybody like holds on to their every word, and then they take this big photo afterwards, like that person knew exactly what they're doing. It's like, sure, but they came from a 1,000-unit brand that was already on Accelerator when they took the job there. They didn't do jack shit. And so now all these emerging franchisors are like, that guy knows what he's doing. It's like, you want to find the person that has the magic trick. Like, it always sounds like I'm brown nosing Brent and I'm putting down Charles, but like, look at Brent's portfolio of taking an emerging brand that has nothing. Voodoo has nothing, putting a stamp on it, showing that he believes in it, and then figuring out the pathway. Charles does this every single day with emerging franchisors that are stuck in the mud, have these big fat dreams. Like, what do I do? Charles, like, your message says you franchise. How about you actually go through a story brand class and actually figure out what you do? And so what's interesting, I think that's where the franchise industry has it wrong. The presidents should be the highest, most profile people. It shouldn't be some bullshit supplier who hasn't done shit. And then the roundtables should be led by emerging brands that are showing a little bit of success. Now, there's another emerging brand out there that is like touting like he's the greatest gift to emerging brands. Like he figured it out. No, the brokers figured it out for him. He is not the superhero. The brokers are the superhero because the brokers are out there every day talking to someone about what franchising is. And so I think the stamp of great information is so screwed up. And so I feel bad for an emerging franchisor that goes into this tornado of not understanding which way is up and which way is down.
I think that's fair. I think it's very fair. And I think, but to Simon's question, right? Like, what's the general consensus there? So, yeah, I think to your point, Nick, people probably were very optimistic. They thought they got exactly what they needed. But, so let's ask ourselves then, what do we think for the rest of the year? And Nick, you said this brilliantly on that Yahoo interview, but I think you're absolutely right. If we're talking about, we need to understand how our deals are going to flow this year. Still very optimistic. We called it in 2022 is going to be the biggest year or two in franchising I've ever seen. And I think that will carry through a little here. But I think, Nick, you're right. It's going to get bumpy when we get closer to election time. It always does. It scares folks, and you got to be prepared for that. It's not probably going to be the same ride we had in 2023. But I think there's still the general consensus out there is that no one's really running back to the idea of, I want to work in corporate America. I got that taste in COVID of running my own thing and being at home. That's going to stick around for a long time, and that'll continue to drive franchise growth. But we have this election thing that might get in the way a little bit. And that's my thoughts on kind of what we look like this year. But Nick, I know you've got a few more detailed thoughts on that for Simon.
Well, I mean, the reality is this, I think. So let's forget about 2024. Like, start with what's the definition of a good franchisee. A good franchisee is someone that can enter my system and continue to scale because they believe in my brand and continue to buy more units because they have a growth mindset. Unfortunately, we classify franchise sales as franchise sales. So everybody is created equally in the way that we talk about our storytelling. So if you sold 10 deals last year, you say, I sold 10 deals. You don't say, I sold 10 deals, of which 3 of these folks are really going to go on a scale with us. And these are going to turn into our avatars of people that we want more to look like this. And so if you tighten up what your definition of a good sale is, you might not need 10, you might need 3, but there are 3 well-capitalized human beings who are going to continue to scale within your business. Now, when you look at 2024, the scale-minded franchisees don't get turned off by an election. They're not the ones that say, I'm going to move to another country if Trump gets elected. They're the ones that say, yeah, it's going to happen, but I'm buying a business that's going to last at least 2 presidents. If we have one for 4 years, and then the next one, if Trump wins, he can no longer run, or Biden wins, he can no longer run. Then we could have 1 or maybe 3 presidents during my 10 years of owning this business. They don't look at an election and get spooked off by it because they're thinking about, how do I build wealth and make a difference for my family? It comes back to the mindset that we've talked about before. So is the mindset positive? No, it isn't. But it's not just because of the election. It's also because I think there's more franchisors than there have ever been. The franchise brokers are really the best sales tool that exists in the business because they've cannibalized the candidates. And so it's decreased the organic deals that are going to come through. And so the amount of fish that are left in the pond are limited for brands. That's what's going to cause some of this friction and for these brands not to hit their goals.
That's so right. And I think to circle it back, I think here's the nice little wrap up from my end, because I'm going to steal what Charles said. Let's take that back to, what do I do for this year? How much should I be spending on a lead and a deal? Am I in the right realm to have a successful year? If you're a brand new brand, like a lot of brands here are, that first 5 at 0, using your own network, looking at your customer base, not spending any in marketing, just that's a way to get proof of concept in itself. To Charles's point, investing in the infrastructure to go after that. After those 5, no less than $25,000 a deal. And you're right, if you want to join an FSO, you're going to give away 80 or 90% of that fee. But that's kind of what the best way to look at this, because as 2024 increases, we're already seeing pretty dramatic increases in cost per lead at Google and Facebook and portals, and that's going to increase. So I think that's a really great strategy if you're new to this and trying to figure out how to have a good year. Make sure you exhausted your existing network, and then 25 per at a minimum on deals. And if you can't afford to do that, then you need to go raise capital or rethink the strategy.
Charles, take us home.
Yeah, well, and then connecting all the dots, 25 per deal after the 5, or no matter what the number is, you tell me what your financial performance is, what's the unit economics of those first 5 franchisees, and then I'm going to tell you if you're going to grow or not. So, lock yourself in, build around those first 5 franchisees. Even if it gets turbulent, if you're a new franchisor with 5, all you do is add 5 more, 100% growth. The opportunity is where everyone else is not focused. So, I mean, get those 5, build strong unit economics, and then you'll get people like Brent interested, and you could put together a real game plan.
We've said enough. I was going to say we've said it. We've said it all.
We absolutely did.
We've said enough. Franchise Flight coming up next. Hey, we're getting this thing organized. Look, the creative's getting better.
Yeah, no, and we're gonna be on next one. We'll be on a YouTube channel and stuff.
And soon CNBC or Fox or whoever, someone's going to
call. No, our YouTube channel is bigger. It's
segment coming up next. See you guys.